Hello and welcome to the first video on domains. Now, what is a domain of a function? In the previous video, we said that a function is a relationship between two variables. For example, if we have y is equal to 2x minus 1, y is a function of x, so this function of x is equal to 2x minus 1. And the input to this function is simply x. We are putting in values of x to get values of y. Now, the domain of a function basically means what are the possible input values that we are actually allowed to put into the function. What are the possible input values that we're allowed to put into the function? For example, this function here, y is equal to 2x minus 1, values that we're putting into this function are values of x. But what are those values of x that we are allowed to put in? What are those values of x that we are allowed to put in? Those values of x that this function can handle are known as the natural domain of the function. The natural domain of this function y here are the values of x that this function can handle, are values of x that this function can handle. When you look at this function here, what are the numbers that this function can handle? Well, any number. You can put in any number into this function and this function will still work. You can put in 1,000 in this function. 2 times 1,000 would be 2,000, and 2,000 minus 1, you would get an answer. You can put in 100, you can put in 50, you can put in 20, you can put in 0, you can put in -1, and so on and so forth. You can even put in decimal numbers, fractions. Any number that you want to put in, you can put into this function, and this function will be able to handle that. Why am I emphasizing the word handle? Because if you have the function y is equal to 2 over x, this function here can't handle every single number, can it? Because if you put in a 0 here, this function will break down. It won't work for 0. So this function won't be able to handle 0 because you can't divide by 0. So this function will not be able to handle 0. That's why I'm emphasizing the word handle, because some numbers that you put into a function, that function won't be able to handle those numbers. It won't be able to work with those numbers. Like that function 2 over x, it can't work with the number 0 because you can't divide a number by 0. Plug it into your calculator. Divide something by 0, you will get a mathematical error. Back to this function here. So what are the numbers that this function can handle? What can you put in? What can this function work with? It can work with any single number. Every single number that you put into this function, it can work with. So the set of numbers that a function can handle, the set of numbers that a function can work with, is known as the natural domain of that function. Is known as the natural domain of that function. Now, there's another type of domain that is called the restricted domain. The restricted domain. The restricted domain means I, as the user of the function, am the one deciding what numbers I want the function to work with. For example, the natural domain of this function says that it can handle every single number there is. But what about if I say, well, look, I'm not interested in every single number there is, I'm just interested in x values that are greater than 4. So I say the domain of this function should be x is greater than 4. What I'm basically saying is the only numbers that I am allowing myself to put into this function are values of x that are greater than 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. But the numbers 4 and below, I'm not allowed to put them into this function. So I am the one who's made that decision and decided that, okay, look, I'm not going to put in any single number that I want. I'm only going to put in values that are greater than 4. So that becomes a restricted domain. A restricted domain means you're going to the natural domain, the numbers that this function can handle, and you are setting boundaries yourself, and you are saying, well, look, I won't allow any number that's less than or equal to 4. I'll only allow numbers that are greater than 4 as my domain. So that becomes your restricted domain. I can also say, well, look, I don't want any number that's equal to 2 or less than 2, and I also don't want any number that's equal to 16 or greater than 16. I just want numbers that are greater than 2 and less than 16 for this function. And I can set this as my domain. X is greater than 2 and less than 16. So this again becomes a restricted domain because I'm going to the natural domain, I'm looking at the numbers that this function can handle, and I'm the one deciding the numbers that I want the function to handle, the numbers that I want the function to use. And I set these domains here, and those are known as the restricted domains.